is the depiction of explicit sexual matter for the sake of sexual arousal. Today, pornography is not only available in books as it used to be years ago, but it is available on the palm top, on your smartphones, and also on the palm tops of children. So, it was high time that the church decided to say a few words on what pornography is doing to the human person, on what pornography is doing to the faithful. It seems like watching porn seems to be an okay getaway from reality, especially when a person is in pain and wants to accept it. One may not exactly realize that a person wants to escape some form of a pain, but unconsciously and subconsciously there is always an escape from some kind of a reality, either a scolding one has received or a boredom which has come, where someone wants some more happiness in one's life. And today, pornography has become the easiest form of pleasure. It is actually accompanied with masturbation. What is masturbation? Masturbation reduces sexual tension and gives a relaxed feeling. Masturbation is arousing oneself sexually by with the help of one's own private parts that we all know. It is easy to avail of and gives instant pleasure. Masturbation is more obviously done among men, but today, and in many years ago too, women in Western countries were doing it, but it is more obviously done among men. Today it is common, it is even promoted as good for health in some Western countries, and in India mainly among the elite or those experimenting among women. Otherwise, it is mostly done among men. And today, because of the internet and what is available on screen, teenagers who would not have, teenage girls especially, who would not even know what masturbation is all about, are beginning to learn to masturbate, which is a sad reality. The Merck manual says that 97% of men and 80% of women in the US have masturbated, and that generally speaking, males masturbate more than females. This is from a study. One scholar, Kennedy, says that masturbation frustrates or impairs an individual's capacity for the joy of interpersonal loving and living. This can be understood because when one masturbates, one is pleasuring oneself to such an extent that everything around, every person around does not matter. No person around matter, whether it is the child, the wife or the husband, it does not matter. What matters is the pleasure which one gets from masturbating. However, Kennedy believes that the moral question must be addressed within the broader context of attending to the psychological needs and the blocks that are making their presence felt through a person's recourse to masturbation. In order to explain this a little more, I would say that when a person feels the person is committing sin in masturbation, that is what the church tells us, and goes to confession, the priest often helps the person to treat other psychological issues which are leading the person into an addictive masturbation. So masturbation is not come from space. It is a human condition, and a human condition is a God-given condition. But when it has, why it becomes excessive, and when it affects us psychologically, when it is a result of a psychological condition, then first the psychological condition needs to be treated, and this help can come from any psychologist, psychiatrist, or when you go for counseling. Well, when we see porn, there is sex there, and that is an expression of aggression and power. How this is, we will see soon. In pornography, the person is abused because he or she is not treated as a whole person. She or he is pleasured and used part by part. Pornography presents nudity and sexual activity in a degrading or depersonalizing way. This was part of the document released by the bishops of the US in 1991. And they realize and they affirm that it is time for people to realize how degrading pornography is. Instead of appreciating the person holistically, parts of the body are highlighted in an exaggerated way often, thus undermining the dignity of the person as a whole. A person, the human body, as I've said also before in my other sessions, is a gift of God. It is sacred. It is a beautiful body, whether it is of the man or of the woman. And when part by part is used as an object for sexual pleasure, it is an insult to the Creator. The body, a beautiful and gracious gift of God, becomes a commodity. It becomes an object for satisfying lust. Pornography is the most graphic representation of the female sexual exploitation, says the Church. And it is floating today like waste of a huge industry of sexual fetishization and commoditization. It has become available on the net for money. It is also available free of charge because people have become immune to even selling their own bodies. This whole situation which pornography has brought to the human condition, it provides a searchlight into our hearts and makes us see and realize what the male power has over women. These are not my words. This is from the document Human Sexuality, a Catholic Perspective by the bishops of USA, which was promulgated in 1991. In pornography, women, children and men all too often are portrayed as objects at the disposal of the sexual lust or violent actions of others. It represents violence against women and is violence against the womanly condition, violence against children. It portrays degrading and abusive sexual behavior so as to endorse or recommend that behavior that is represented. It is the undiluted essence of anti-female propaganda. It is truly anti-female propaganda, but in a very subtle manner. It forms part of the male counteract against women. It seems to show as if the woman is happily acting there. But remember, it is always an act. It is an act in order to be paid, so that somewhere somebody is gaining from portraying this act. So the violence expressed is clearly an expression of male fear and a sugar-coated violent reaction at the potential power of women. How this is, we will see soon. The Church, in its catechism, in fact, you can go and check it out on catechism number 2354. It says that pornography perceived as a grave injury to the dignity of the participants, the actors, vendors, and the public. Since one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others, one's body, parts of one body become objects of base pleasure and illicit profit for others. Thus, it is clear that pornography is not so much about sex as it is about power and violence, as it is about domination and aggression. Let us have a look at how pornography connects to the sexual aggression in males. Data suggests that hormonal differences might point towards aggressiveness, but the major factor is social influence. Violence is largely a learned behavior, whether in women or in men. Already in 1986, a survey was done in the United States where most crimes were by males between 13 and 24. The issue of violence is an issue of both male sexuality and masculine spirituality, says James Nelson, who is a scholar in this topic. He suggests that male sexual behavior is often aggressive, though violence is an influence mainly of the society one is brought up in. He believes that the idea has become ingrained in the male psyche that the way to assert one's manhood is through aggressive action. If you are not aggressive, you are not a man. If you want to show that you are a man, you need to be aggressive. This kind of an attitude has been put into our children right from the time they know that they are boys. Boys and adolescent males are often made to understand that becoming a man implies being anything but feminine or womanly, which included free expression of feelings, tenderness, affection. If you express your feelings easily, if you are tender, if you are affectionate, you are womanly, you are feminine. So you should not be tender, you should not be affectionate if you want to show that you are a man. This kind of attitude has been ingrained in the Indian psyche and even in most of the psyches of cultures worldwide. Then there have been cultural and ritual passages where when a young child turns into a man, to endure beating, they have forced masturbation, circumcision, or even hunt wild animals or kill enemies to prove their manhood. One who fails the ordeal was considered less than a man. Thus, the manhood psyche could be developed only by the destruction of the feminine. Destruction of the feminine characteristics in young males. So many of the boys of our world have been brought up with this kind of a psyche, which is a sad thing. To understand the mystery of violence and male sexuality, one needs to understand the ways men deal with death. Most men do it in a paradoxical way. On one hand, some males avoid it, defy it, or try to deny it. And on the other hand, men embrace violent death with fascination. More when the victim is not themselves, but even if they themselves are the victim, like a suicide bomber. Or just to make you understand, in our Bollywood world, or even in Hollywood, that if the man or the hero is not aggressively killing his enemy or aggressively shedding blood of their enemies, they are not considered heroes. The film will just flop. That is for you to understand how violence and aggression are so important for the human beings today, especially men, to understand the manlyhood, the manhood of the man, the manliness of the man. There has to be violence in death. There has to be some kind of an aggression in the killing. It is a sad thing though. Gratuitous violence sells well in cinema. We can see that. And so, pornographic sexual violence is therefore a ludicrous business. And games like football celebrate controlled violence. You will see when you watch football, if there is no violence, people are not enjoying it. But if there is violence and hitting and kicking, it is an enjoyed game. Let us look at what church history talks about women in the case of this kind of attitude which people have developed towards women. Tertullian wrote that the woman is the devil's gateway, believe it or not. Saint Augustine wrote that alone then she is not the image of God, that the woman is not the image of God. This is the thinking of what the olden church has been brought up with. Luther said, a woman is not fully master of herself, which means a woman cannot take decisions on her own, does not know what she is saying. So you can imagine this is how the church, the Christian church and the Catholic church has been brought up with. Therefore, aggression seems to be carried into their interaction with women, and this kind of aggressive behavior comes in any interaction with women. Aggressive men are usually fascinated by women, but also wary or subconsciously fearful of them. That means they become vulnerable before women, and they need to hide that vulnerability. So what they do is they put on a brave front, they put on an aggressive front, rather a mask or a persona of courage and of boldness, which shares a thin borderline with aggression. This is what generally happens. So their vulnerability also could lead to intimacy, and this is unacceptable to the man because of their prejudice, their prejudiced manly mindset, which threatens their manhood in a way. So precisely because vulnerability is similar to womanliness, so they cannot be vulnerable, they have to be aggressive, and they cannot show any sign of femininity. So their aggression is their defense against their own unmanly tendencies. So friends, if you find persons are aggressive, remember, actually they don't want to be aggressive, but they need help to throw away all these masks and which they have developed from their society. Do not condemn them, do not treat them badly, or do not judge them. Try to tell them if they are able to listen, or get somebody else to tell them, or ask them to get help in order to remove off these unmanly tendencies. Sadly, these defenses are learned and man-made and are not at all in line with true human nature, which seeks love, peace, harmony and friendship with its fellow beings. It is the reluctance to lay aside these defenses that make men establish sexual relationships on their own terms, and in often very, very violent ways. To stop sexual aggression in males, it would be required to unlearn their prejudices first, which are stuck in their mind. Not only in the minds of men, even the minds of women who have learned these prejudices about men, especially fears of vulnerability and their equations with womanliness, and develop true understanding of their sexuality and its true meaning and destiny, which God has done, which God has given us. Right in the beginning, God made man and woman to help each other, to accompany each other tenderly, affectionately through life, not aggressively. Well, friends, the church speaks a lot on all these topics which I told you, and these are available in the magisterial documents. One of the documents is from the CBCI, a Christian response to the gift of human sexuality, 1987. Then Doctrinal and Moral Problems of Asia, 1993. The CBCI Statement on the Empowerment of Women in the Church and Society, 2008. FABC, The Asian Family Towards a Culture of Life, 2004. FABC, The Encounter with Christ as Renewing the Asian Youth, 2015. FABC, Families in Asia, Serving and Being Served, 2015. In the Indian Church, there is CBCI, a Christian response to the gift of human sexuality. What we will see now is what the church actually says, and the church has been saying with regard to these issues of masturbation and of pornography, etc., etc. Right from the time of 1975, it was this document called Persona Humana, the decree on certain questions concerning sexual ethics, 1975, where Paul VI reiterated his thoughts on what the church thinks about these topics. Then in 1993, there was Veritatis Splendor by Pope John Paul II, and here too many the moral aspects of life were spoken about, and in this document also one sees that this whole aspect of the body being beautiful and the body not being inviting us not to use the body as an object has been called upon by Pope John Paul II. Another document in 1989 was Pornography and Violence in the Communications Media. So you can see the actual word pornography and violence has been used by the church in this document, Pornography and Violence in the Communications Media, and way back in 1989, and a pastoral response to this. This was also during the time of Pope John Paul II. Later on, the United States bishops came out with a document called Human Sexuality, a Catholic Perspective for Education and Lifelong Learning. Yes, in 1991. This particular document also spoke about aspects of pornography and human sexuality and how the body must be used for, not be used, but the body is a God-given gift and must not be abused. One of the more recent ones where the church has directly counteracted pornography is Create in Me a Clean Heart, a pastoral response to pornography use. This was in 2015, just a few years ago, where the bishops of the United States came together and realized how youth, even children and adults, married couples are being destroyed by pornography. And this document really was an opening to looking into our hearts and seeing where we are going, and invited us to a cleaner heart. Most recently, 2 years ago, Pope Francis in October had addressed the people with this document, Child Dignity in the Digital World. One is well aware of the crisis which has shaken up the church, the sexual abuse, the minor sexual abuse crisis, which opened a Pandora's box. And Pope Francis very rightly brought about this document, Child Dignity in the Digital World, where he invites people not to use children for such base pleasures. Children who are so innocent and who are signs of God's presence need to be looked at as a presence and image of God and the remembrance of God, not of base pleasures. Coming to the Indian Church, CBCI, this is the Conference of Catholic Bishops of India, have brought about some documents. In 1987, a Christian response to the gift of human sexuality was brought about by them. Then in CBCI, the CBCI also brought out Doctrinal and Moral Problems of Asia in the year 1993. A CBCI statement on the empowerment of women in the church and society was brought about in 2008. And the FABC, that is from Asia, the Asian Family Towards a Culture of Life, 2004. And FABC, another document, The Encounter with Christ as Renewing the Asian Youth, 2015. And one of the last in Asia was from the Asian Church was Families in Asia Serving and Being Served. So friends, with this I conclude this particular session, and I invite you to listen to what the church is saying, to listen to your heart, to listen to the heart and mind of the church and what it has to say about this issue the world is facing.